Hello, and welcome to S.T.E.A.M of Consciousness, a program presented by the ARI Podcasting Network and hosted by George Koperna. What is S.T.E.A.M? S.T.E.A.M stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Art, and Mathematics. During each episode, we will take a few minutes to sit down with professionals in different STEAM-related fields to give them an opportunity to share their story and give their perspectives with the goal of promoting career awareness to potentially interested students, young professionals, and of course, anyone else who shares a fascination with these areas of study. And now, please join us as we tap into the STEAM of consciousness.
Welcome to STEAM of Consciousness, a program on the ARI Podcasting Network. I'm George Koperna, and today we're fortunate enough to have Anna Littlefield. Welcome, Anna.
Hi, thanks, George.
Anna, I'd like to say that this meeting just shows how tenacious we are. The weather had conspired against us, and lo and behold, we're able to persevere. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. Happy to be here. Yeah, it was multiple storms that pushed this back from all across the country.
It's been that kind of winter, and I'd like to acknowledge, the year with the Colorado School of Mines, as well as the Payne Institute. And could you tell me a little bit about what you do with the Payne Institute?
Absolutely. Yes. So I am the low carbon energy program manager for the Payne Institute. I was formerly the CCUS program manager, and we've recently updated my title to include subjects like geothermal and hydrogen energy. Yeah. So I've been essentially everything subsurface. My background is geoscience. I worked for many years as a geologist in the oil and gas industry before coming back into academia. At the Payne Institute, we kind of serve as a bit of a go-between from mines to the rest of the world. There's a lot of really great research that happens at mines. The technical depth and breadth is immense, but sometimes it's difficult for professors to also speak to the outside world about why their research is important and how policy and socio-technical issues kind of interact with their work that they do. And so at the Payne Institute, we try to work with professors in that way and really focus on convening. We are really good at holding conversations that between parties that don't necessarily always talk, regulators, industry representatives, academics, etc. So that's what we do at Payne. And I'm also a student at Mines. So I'm a PhD candidate, hopefully finishing my PhD in December.
And your PhD is going to be in?
Geochemistry. So I'm working with Dr. Alexis Sichler, and I'm studying the geochemical impact of injecting CO2 into the subsurface.
It's very impressive. How do you balance all of that and a family?
And a family. I have an incredibly supportive husband, and that helps a lot with balancing, and two great kids. And yeah, I just have to work full days and make time to do all the things. My PhD has probably taken a little bit longer than it would have if I wasn't working full time for the last few years at Payne. But in terms of what I've learned in my exposure to the policy world through the work that I do at Payne and also the other initiatives at Payne, we have the Earth Observation Group, which does remote monitoring of methane emissions. We have the Critical Minerals Initiative, the Responsible Gas Initiative or Methane Reduction Initiative. And it's been an incredible learning experience to kind of get a bigger picture on the energy landscape, just in a more comprehensive way than what a PhD allows you to do, which is very focused. So,
well, you got to be getting close. How long before we can call you Dr. Littlefield?
All things going well, December.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, let us know if you need any help in any way. I don't know what I can do for you.
Thank you.
Way smarter than I am. But let's talk a little bit. I mean, we talked about this a little bit before. We're both mountaineers, although I went to West Virginia, you went to App State. What drew you to Appalachian State?
Well, it wasn't really geology, actually. I didn't know that was what I was going to study going in. I went to an art high school, Northwest School of the Arts, where I studied visual art, studio art, and planned to major in art in college. And that's what I came into Appalachian State thinking I would be doing. I went to App because I just love being in the mountains, and my brother went to App. He was actually a cheerleader there back in gosh, the 80s. He's a bit older than me. And he had a great experience. You know, I'd gone up to Boone with my parents growing up in North Carolina several times and just really fell in love with the town. And so, yeah, came in as a studio art major. Briefly switched my major to outdoor experiential education, which is kind of like getting a degree in being a camp counselor, which is what I did during the summer. And then thankfully I took a geology 101 and absolutely fell in love with the subject and the lab specifically, because we got to go outside every day and you know, learn about the rocks that surrounded Boone and why the mountains looked the way they did. And I had never really had answers to those questions that I guess were existing in the back of my head. And I just really, really fell in love with geology at that point.
That's so interesting. I mean, I've talked to people who've gone through that process once they're enrolled in college, but not going to a specific art school. I mean, it's the A in STEAM, right? It's science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. And you're really beginning to show how I think people think about problem solving and skills development, that those attract. I mean, my daughter went to university for theater and after a semester said, no, I really want to be an engineer, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But I mean, can you tease that out a little bit further?
Yeah, I mean, I do think there are a lot of people with artistic backgrounds that wind up in geology specifically just because it requires three-dimensional thinking and a degree of just artistry in any kind of mapping that you do. Um, for me personally, and in school, high school, middle school, I would have said I was an English history kid, not a math and science kid. And looking back, I really think that's because of the way that that education was designed. It felt like it was really pulling in the boys in high school. It was like, oh, we're going to take a science class, and that means we get to build rockets and robots and do all these things that a lot of girls do enjoy as well. But I found that the friends that I had that were interested in the science and math in high school were much more interested in the mechanics of it. And the friends that I had that were more in what field I thought I would be in were more interested in the people. And I don't think that we kind of as a STEM or STEAM community communicate well to younger students that there are ways to have impacts on people's lives going into science and engineering and math. I don't think that's like as easy a case to make. I mean, I think the case is very easy to make. I don't think we do a good job of communicating that to younger folks, that you can make a difference in people's lives and still study science. You can make a difference in people's lives and be an engineer. It doesn't mean that you're only going to be dealing with the math and the, you know, the technical things. You can certainly put your nose to the grindstone and shut your office door and never talk to anybody. That's what a lot of people want. But for those people that want to help, want to have an impact on people's lives, I think there are STEM pathways to that. They're just not as familiar, maybe.
And so, normally I ask this about folks to step in their Wayback Machine and think about high school, but for you, it was actually at App State. So did you just by chance take a geology course, or what attracted you to it? How did you trip over it?
I mean, it was really chance. It was like, what is the easiest science class I could take? And I was like, well, biology sounds interesting, but I heard you just have to memorize a lot of terminology, and I don't want to do that. I've always liked rocks. Like I collected rocks as a kid. It would be kind of cool to know which rocks are which. And so I signed up for Geology 101 completely having no intention of studying anything in the science department. And there was a bit of it that it was like I found my subject in that first class, but it was really the first couple field trips, like extracurricular field trips that I volunteered to go on, that I felt like I'd found my people too. And so I signed up for a field trip, a field course out to New Mexico and Arizona, and it was called the Triassic trip because we were looking at fossils and some dinosaurs, some technically pre-dinosaur amphibians of the Triassic period, and had an excellent professor leading that trip, Dr. Andy Heckert, and that was pretty impactful, I think, in that I had never been to the desert. I had never been really out of the Southeast. And just getting to see those rock formations, and I just kind of experiencing a whole new world in the field, and learning how to make field observations and keep a field notebook, and obviously the added excitement of getting to dig up fossils was was a bonus. And yeah, that trip was really what kind of solidified my passion, I would say, for geology as a whole.
So nothing like a little archaeology with your hat and bullwhip.
Exactly. It was fun. I mean, it did feel kind of unreal looking back to be plucked out of, North Carolina and all of a sudden be in the middle of the desert and literally digging up bones. And it was surreal, but incredible.
So that kind of lit the fuse for you, and you were hooked.
Absolutely. I mean, and App State is really unique in that we don't have a graduate program in the geology department. And so all of the experiences or opportunities that would go to graduate students, all the grunt work, the field work, the research assistantships, those all go to undergraduates. And so by my second year in geology, I was helping TA labs and tutor in the geology museum, and doing research with professors. And they had all these extracurricular trips you could volunteer to go on. I got to go to the Dominican Republic with our mineralogy professor. We did the paleontology trip to New Mexico. And then we had just kind of one-offs to the mountains of Virginia, out to Tennessee, all through the department. And just really, we had an incredible staff and faculty when I was there, and still do. And we just got a lot of one-on-one attention because of the class size. And yeah, and all the other students that were majoring in geology were just great people, and we're still friends. And I felt like I kind of found my home within Appalachian State there in the geology department, and definitely didn't expect it. But yeah, my parents were relieved that I switched from art to to geology, so that was good.
Well, sure. The dad in me agrees.
Yeah. Yep.
So, but that's phenomenal because you got not only the traditional school work and the learning that way, but you had hands-on experience in the labs. You worked R&D projects. You got to test a whole bunch of things, field trips that a normal geologic student would do after they graduated. You got to do that well before to understand what you liked and what you didn't like.
Absolutely. And I found that I really loved field work, wanted to keep doing that. As a kind of incoming college student, I had no intention of going beyond the 4-year undergraduate kind of phase. But once I got into it, and I don't know, especially probably engineering as well, but in the geosciences, it's because geology is such a broad science and touches all the other sciences. It almost feels like graduate school is necessary if you want to focus in on anything, because you just touch everything so quickly and briefly in your undergraduate studies. And so I did end up deciding to go to graduate school, especially once my professors told me they'll pay you to go if you just teach while you're there. And I thought that sounded like a great option to come out with a degree, having been paid for a couple of years to do it. Yeah, and so then decided to pursue my master's in geology after leaving App.
Now, what drew you to Texas A&M? Was it you wanted to focus on energy issues, or was that just they offered the best deal, or you just fell in love with the campus? I mean, I've been to Bryan, Texas, so
Not the campus, for sure. That wasn't it. No, ironically enough, I had no idea that oil and gas was even an option, a career path that one could take. That's just not something we really talked that much about at App State. It wasn't something that I knew anyone that went into it. And as far as picking Texas A&M, I was at GSA in Portland, Oregon, the year before I would be applying for schools, and just bouncing around to all the booths, talking to the different students and the professors that were represented there. And I met a couple students at the Texas A&M booth who were just really enthusiastic, and they really loved their advisor. And I told them I wanted to study landslides because I thought that sounded exciting and impactful. And that's kind of what I had just decided to study. It was, I kind of pulled that out of the hat, but I ended up reaching out to several different professors, and like you said, A&M kind of gave me the best deal. But also the professor there that I ended up working with, Dr. Giordino, he studied landslides in Colorado. And I thought, well, Colorado wouldn't be a bad field site. And he seemed like a nice person and really passionate about his work. And so I did the recruiting weekend visit at A&M, and I will never forget walking around campus, which took me a lot longer than I thought it was going to, because it's an enormous campus.
Big campus.
And everybody there was wearing maroon. And so I came back after walking around for a couple hours. I came back to meet with my future advisor, and I said, "Hey, is there like a game today or a pep rally or some kind of event?" And because everybody's wearing maroon. And he said, "Oh yeah, well that's our school color." And I said, "Yeah, I know, but why is everybody wearing it?" And he was like, "I don't understand the question." And it was at that point that I realized A&M was a very different type of school. I didn't realize it fully until I got there. I don't want to say cultish, but enthusiastic fan base and
There's a lot of school pride.
lots of school pride, lots of traditions. It was almost intimidating. I knew there was grass I wasn't allowed to walk on, and certain things that you had to do before an exam, and statues that were good luck, and trees that were good luck, and it was just there was a lot to learn. But I really enjoyed my time there, and still have a lot of great friends from my graduate studies. College Station is an interesting place, but I had a good 2 years there.
And so you said before you went to College Station, you were moving around, you're trying to figure out, I don't know enough yet. Let's continue to expand your brain. And you're there. Did you stay in landslides? Did you move around, or what drew you to the energy industry ultimately following your master's degree?
Well, it's a bit circuitous. I didn't end up studying landslides explicitly. I sometime during my first year at A&M, I was contacted that I had been awarded the National Association of Geoscience Teachers internship at the USGS. And so that was exciting and very flattering. I was happy to have been nominated by my professor from field camp in Turkey. And so I applied. You got to pick like several different locations you may go to for the summer internship, and I picked Boulder, Colorado, and I ended up working with this amazing scientist, John Moody, at the USGS, and I think he was originally a physicist, kind of turned geologist. So he was very intense and very passionate, and we did this big field project studying how burn severity affects runoff and soil infiltration. And so it was after the 4 Mile Canyon fire that at that point was the most devastating fire to have hit Colorado ever. A lot of homes were lost. There have since, unfortunately, been several more that have taken its title. But so I spent the whole summer installing the instrumentation, monitoring it. Every 3 days I was in the field collecting the data. And at the end of the summer, John said, "If you want to use this data for your master's thesis, you're welcome to." And so that was a huge, favor to me. And it essentially, because I hadn't really gotten started too much on research in my first year at A&M. And so I came back and told my advisor, like, I have this new data set and I know the project backwards and forwards. I installed the instruments, I calibrated the instruments, and then I collected all the data. I know this isn't exactly your field area, but can I do my project on this? And he said, absolutely, especially if your mentor at the USGS is willing to help you with edits and kind of get through it. So so that's how I got to my master's thesis. And the second, when I was interning at the USGS, all of my cohort was interning at oil and gas companies. And initially I was like, that's not for me. I came here to study, engineering, geology, landslides, etc. I'm not doing that. And then at the end of the summer, I started poking around at the USGS and for job opportunities, and there just were none. And so I was getting really discouraged by the kind of prospects in the hydrogeology field, which is where I thought I would land. And I started going to the informational sessions from the oil and gas companies. And I remember going to the one with Anna Darko and being really impressed by how many international offices they had and opportunities to travel and training as well. Their training program was excellent, and the field trips that they offered. And so I thought, well, what's the harm? I'll just interview. It'll be good practice at the very least. And they ended up offering me an internship. And then I panicked a little bit because I accepted it and realized I don't know anything about oil and gas. So I should probably learn some of that before this internship starts. So I signed up for the Imperial Barrel Award competition to kind of help me get a crash course in all things oil and gas, which thank goodness I did that because that was incredibly instructive. We had mentors from Anadarko and other oil and gas companies coming to show me what a well log was, tell me how to read a gamma ray, and things like that I had no exposure to up to that point. And so yeah, so I started at Anadarko in the summer of 2012, and then got a full-time offer at the end of the summer, and wound up working there for quite a while.
Not doing landslides.
Not doing landslides, no. Not at all. No.
No, but that's, it's a circuitous route. I mean, not every pathway is right through each door, right? It's not a gated pathway. And working in the energy industry, I mean, you had the fundamentals from your undergraduate and graduate degrees. It says a lot about your again tenacity to sign up to do the Imperial Barrel Contest and learn a little bit about something that people spend 4 years learning about. And so the learning curve must have been tremendous.
It was. Yeah, it was. I still look back on some of my notes from from my internship in my first year at Anadarko, and I hope other people keep good notes and like don't throw away your old notebooks, because it's so fun to go back and look at what I didn't know and what I was taking notes on, especially sitting in like drilling meetings. I would just have a list of acronyms at the end of it with question marks behind each of them. I don't know what that means. I just didn't know what anything meant, and now it's like a second language that I speak. But yeah, no, I think it's something that I hope more people in the sciences are aware of, that companies aren't always looking for experience in exactly what they're hiring for. Sometimes they are, but sometimes, especially if it's early career and you're straight out of college, they know they can train you. They're just looking for passion and excitement and dedication to the science. And so I I ended up recruiting at A&M after once I got hired on full time there. And I remember talking to the person who interviewed and hired me, and he said, what stuck out to us is you talking about your fieldwork in Turkey and how passionate you were about it, and then you talking about your fieldwork in Boulder and how how much you knew about it and how excited you were about the products, and your thesis and et cetera. And that was why we hired you, not because I'd competed in IBA, or not because I knew anything about oil and gas, but because I showed, excitement about geology in the end. So.
Well, I mean, being excited about what you do is tantamount to enjoying what you do, right?
So
And
true.
so I think a lot of the things that we look for when advanced resources hires is, are they trainable, right? Back in the early days when unconventionals really truly were unconventional, we were going to have to train people what coal bed methane was, what oil and gas from shales was, what tight oil was, or gas. And so trying to understand and quantify how trainable somebody might be, or willing to learn. And so enthusiasm goes a long way, I think is the expression, right? And so,
Absolutely.
but you were at Anadarko until the merger, correct?
Yes.
Or
And
the
I stayed on, yeah. So I stayed on for a year after the merger as well, a little over a year. So yeah, so originally we thought we were getting bought by Chevron. And then that over the weekend that, we actually watched a welcome video from the CEO welcoming us all
Wow.
to Chevron, the Chevron family. And then the next week it was Oxy, and all of a sudden we were getting bought by Oxy. So it was a very interesting time. And yeah, once it became official that it was going to be Oxy, we were going to be Oxy, I started researching the company a little bit, and I saw that they had something called the Low Carbon Ventures Team, and it had recently been formed, and it was still a bit in its infancy, and I thought that sounded really exciting, and I had never heard of carbon sequestration or carbon storage, and so I actually, I'm up in the Denver office, and the LCV was based in Houston, but I I wanted to join that team very badly, and so I started a discussion group. Everybody was kind of in a bit of a state of turmoil, not knowing what their jobs were going to be, or what we should be focusing on. There had been a lot of like pause work on this specific project, focus over here kind of orders, and a lot of people just waiting. And so I started a kind of study group or discussion group within Anadarko Oxy to learn about carbon storage. And we actually had a couple people who'd worked EOR projects that were experts in that area. And so we invited them in to talk about the mechanics of EOR and, how that's used, and then kind of expanded that into CCS. And we read a few papers and just talked about them. And then when we were officially integrated, I did get to join the low carbon mentors team after lobbying really hard to get on that team. And so that was really fun. I worked mostly the land grant assets, and looking at the Rock Springs uplift for its potential for carbon storage, and was still doing that when COVID hit in 2020, and everybody was work from home. And I had gotten so interested in carbon storage that I had started talking to a couple professors at Mines, Alexis Sitchler, who's now my advisor, and Manika Prasad, who heads up the kind of carbon storage consortia out of the geophysics department. I started talking to them about maybe doing a part-time master's degree while I kept working. And then I was already having those conversations when Oxy offered these great severance packages, and I raised my hand to go and decided instead of doing a part-time master's, I was going to go back and do a full-time PhD. That's how I got here.
So what drew you to academia? What brought you back?
Ugh, that's a great question, because I can remember being in my master's at A&M and looking at the people in my research group that were adults and had children and had worked for 10 years before coming back, and thinking, what are you doing? Once I get a job, I'm not coming back. I hate school. I'm not doing it. And I loved my graduate studies. I loved college, but as a child, I hated school. So my parents have always been perplexed by the fact that I've opted to stay in school for this long voluntarily. I just wanted to be back in an atmosphere where I could ask questions and learn. And the idea of pivoting, having this opportunity to pivot, having this like ability to walk away from my job with a little bit of a cushion, a financial cushion, while my husband was still working. So that helped a lot too. But, and kind of study something tangential to what I had done, certainly still subsurface, but really focus on the geochemistry components of it. That really appealed to me. In my rose-colored glasses, envisioning my PhD studies, I guess in my head, I remembered more chemistry than I thought I did, because when I got here and the first day of my chemistry classes, I thought, I'm going to have to be doing some remedial studying, because there's a lot that I have forgotten. I hadn't taken a chemistry class since undergrad, so it'd been a while. And that I never in my life have I hung up a report card on a refrigerator until I made an A in my chemistry class here at Mines my first semester, because I worked so hard for that, and I was very, very proud of it.
My
But
daughters teased me so many times about going to get a PhD, and I said, I don't have to take tests right now. No exams.
it's one of those things that you don't. I remembered the like kind of all of the lovely things about graduate school, the meetings with your advisor and research, and talking with your cohort about ideas and collaborations and projects and experiments and times in the lab. And I had kind of forgotten about homework and quizzes and lab reports and tests and all those things. I remembered very quickly upon coming back. But luckily, all that's behind me now. I'm completely finished with all of my coursework. So it's only thing between me and graduating is the dissertation. So
If not for tripping over a geology course at App State.
exactly.
Well, I like to end our discussions with one question. And Anna, I'm going to ask you, what do you love about your job?
Gosh, there are so many things that I love about my job. Um, Working in I get the best of both worlds where I am, because I'm working in policy and I get to collaborate with industry, and I have the whole full force of minds research behind me as well. I get to touch all things technical and social and legal and policy and economics. And it's, when I came in to get my PhD, I told my advisor that I like being a generalist, which is really not what she probably wanted to hear, because when you're getting a PhD, you really have to specialize in something. And she kind of told me that. She's like, well, you're gonna have to pick one thing to write your, dissertation on. And I said, I know. But I really like having this lens where I get to think about how the technical and the policy overlap. That's kind of my job description in a nutshell. And it's really rewarding, because you can have the best research and plans, but if you can't get a permit to do them, to execute these projects, it's really, the science doesn't push forward. And I have been very passionate about, specifically in the carbon storage and carbon management world, the challenge of permits and permitting, and how that has really just been a challenge to the industry as a whole. But all these things work together to advance the science, and that's what I want to do, is help advance the science. And I think bringing the right people together in the same room, from a policy perspective and a regulatory perspective and an academic and an industry perspective, is really powerful. And I've just seen that with all of the events that Payne holds, the ability to convene and have those important conversations, and the fruit that has come out of that. So I love being able to be a part of that, and being able to touch carbon management and geothermal and hydrogen. And it feels like a really fun time to be working in this space.
And to echo one of your interviewers' remarks, I see the enthusiasm coming through. So
good.
I thank you, soon to be Dr. Anna Littlefield.
Thank you.
And keeping our fingers crossed. And to Ryan Kessler for producing this podcast. This has been a presentation of the ARI Podcasting Network.
Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to listen to new episodes of Stream of Consciousness, available on your preferred podcast listening station.